Ah, Freedom Dive. Such an iconic map. The streams are just so mesmerizing to watch. How do I make a map as impressive as Freedom Dive? Well, let's start with the basics. What is a stream? Classically, it is referred to as two or more objects placed in 1-4 timing away from each other, but these days it usually means 4 or more circles in 1-4 or higher timing. They're also made with the intention of alternating through both keys to hit every note. Let's have a look at how streams are played. 1-4 timing, in most maps, is too fast to be snapped to effectively, so players will flow to each circle without dropping momentum. So much like sliders then. In fact, a lot of mappers even use sliders to create their streams. However, unlike sliders, there is no follow circle. That means the tolerated path through a stream is much stricter. As a side note, streams are usually made up of an odd number of objects, so that the strong beats can be emphasized correctly. I personally like to view streams as a group of notes, and then treat those group of notes like a slider. Many streams follow similar shapes to sliders, after all. You can then apply similar slider rules to streams, for example, visual and circular flow. Okay, so now we know what a stream is. Now let's take a look at what we can do to change a stream. The first thing we can do is change its spacing. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that changing the spacing to be further apart makes it more difficult to play, but let's try to understand why. For small spacing, the next circle will be overlapping the circle before it, and for very small spacing, this overlapping will chain together. What this overlap means is that it's possible to have your cursor ready for more than one circle at a time, and therefore you will need to move your cursor less through the stream. Increasing the spacing means you need to travel more distance in the same amount of time, so that increases the speed, and being able to manage high speeds is just simply difficult. With less overlaps, there is also a higher chance of hitting a dead zone if your cursor is moving too fast or too slow, which can really mess up your timing. Therefore, the relationship between stream spacing and difficulty is most likely non-linear. It's possible to change the spacing of a stream section partway through. Here, I would personally see these as two groups of streams, one with lower spacing and one with higher. Responding to a change in spacing requires an active role from the player. So like you would with new sliders, a new stream group should start on some significant beat. This pattern looks kinda fancy though, doesn't it? Down here, the flow changes direction suddenly, and the same thing happens up here too. These are what I call stream corners, and they can be used to give emphasis to certain objects in a stream since, again, they require an active role from the player to respond to. Again, you should treat them as separate groups with slider rules. Ideally, you want the most significant beat to be the start of the new group, since that will be the note where you change directions on, and will give the beat the most emphasis. This is the most common way of building a stream corner. The other method is to have the significant beat be the second note after the corner. This is less ideal, but is still acceptable as the player still needs to change directions to hit this note. Now, kick sliders. These can be used to break up a stream while still mapping to 1-4, because solid streaming for long periods of time is pretty difficult. They're typically placed during parts where the music does something a little different. Different rhythm style, different mapping style. Makes sense, right? They're almost always placed starting on white or red ticks so that the beats can be emphasized correctly. The same rules can also be applied to repeat sliders. Using kick sliders means we introduce some slider leniency mechanics, and also requires a slightly lower active note density. This means we can use kick sliders to create stream jumps for another emphasis tool. Stream jumps can be made without kick sliders too, and instead would act as one continuous stream while the cursor jumps. These are significantly more difficult to play than without kick sliders, so if you're using these in your map, you should make sure you know what you're doing. For both cases, you should treat the jump as the start of a new group and apply slider rules. Visual and circular flow are a lot more important here, because of the momentum acquired from the previous stream to enter the next. Of course, keep in mind that the note you're jumping to should be some sort of strong beat that you want to emphasize. Unless you're Skystar.